Have you ever wanted to know what it's like to break a world record? Well, I'm about to tell you exactly my experience and the pros, the cons, and what I would change if I could change anything looking back almost 10 years. Hey, it's Brandon Smitley here from Thirst Gym, and today we're going to talk about when I broke the all-time world record squat at 132 pounds in March of 2015. This took place at the Arnold Expo XPC event, and I squatted 565 pounds at 132 pounds body weight and a belt and knee wraps, breaking the previous record by Richard Hawthorne. I then went on to re-break my own record by 1 kilo or 2 pounds, essentially 20-ish months later at WPC Worlds in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, again where I squatted 567 and became a world champion at that event as well. Now, what you might be thinking here is, what kind of relevance could this potentially happen to me? What are the chances that I actually do something like that? And I will be quite frank with you, I was probably in that seat that you're in right now. At no point did I ever think in my powerlifting career that I would break an all-time world record, let alone be able to do it again within essentially a 2-year period. Now, I think many people think that it would be cool to have an all-time world record. And my record has now since been broken. I'm not going to discuss the quality of said record that broke it. That's for another discussion, and quite frankly, I don't care. It's the judge's decision. It is what it is. But I did hold that record for, I believe, 5 or 6 years. I mean, it was a good amount of time that I held that record before it was broken. But I did not see myself being in that position to be able to go do that. So the reason I want to discuss this is because I think some people look at the records that are being broken in powerlifting and they are certainly amazing. The records just continue to get pushed and pushed, whether that's the advancements of gear, the advancements of training knowledge and recovery, the advancement of supplementation, both legal and illegal supplementation, so PEDs and steroids, and the ability to have quality ran meets with quality equipment and things of that nature. So the sport has grown immensely since I've been deep into the sport of my competitive days. But I think sometimes many people want to know what it's like to break it or have one, and what that process kind of looks like. So I'm going to break that down for you here today. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the training that led up to said record. My goal going into this meet was to, one, hit a PR total and be in the running to be able to win money. There was cash money awarded for this event, and ultimately that's what I wanted to do. I was in the lightweight session. I believe this was like the 198 and under, 181 and under pound weight class, somewhere around there. I can't remember, quite frankly, anymore. But I did obviously go on to win that flight and that session of that meet, and that's what basically awarded me the money. But I did take the record on an extra attempt because I was 3 for 3, and my handler at the time, Mario D'Amico, and Dave Tate was also there as well, gave me some coaching advice and said that, hey, it's there. I did have training partners with me in my garage that were somewhat feeding this idea to me, but at the time, I believe my previous best squat was 525 and the record was 565. 40 pounds is a lot of weight when you're talking those kind of weights at those body weights. I mean, that's a giant percentage. That's 8-ish, 7-ish%, somewhere around there in terms of more weight that needs to be added to the bar. So it wasn't on my radar, but nonetheless, the training cycle was really good. I obviously took it. I obviously broke that record. And in the moment, I was obviously excited. I'm sure you're going to see the video clip that's already posted from the B-roll. But essentially, I had already done more in that one meet than I ever thought possible. So the hindsight after the meet was, what's next? How much more is left in the tank? My career was just really kind of getting started. This was like my third big meet, and so I didn't really know what was still left on the table. I was still making some pretty solid weight cuts, anywhere from 8 to 12 pounds on average. And so my time after that was really just spent on doing hypertrophy work and getting to feel good. And I actually tried to re-break that record at a couple other meets, and I just quite didn't get there. So it went back to the drawing board in terms of what's really needed to do that. And I think that's one thing that people don't understand, is that what works for one training cycle may not exactly work well for other training cycles. So determining upon like where your weak points are, both mentally, physically, and then even technically, that's going to change how your training cycles look. So you can't just duplicate training cycles and expect to get the same results. I think we all know that when it comes to training, even different people, different times are all going to get different results. So that's what the training looked like led up to it. So let's kind of talk about the following meet where I rebroke it, which was WPC Worlds. All right, as I mentioned, the second time that I broke the record, which was essentially my own record, was at WPC Worlds. And again, this was on a 4th attempt. Again, going into this meet, the goal was just to become a world champion. It was to win my weight class. It was to win the session. There was no money involved, unfortunately, but it was just a lot of bragging rights. And today's powerlifting probably doesn't think much of WPC Worlds, but at the time, it was a big time meet. It was essentially a whole week. It obviously was not drug tested. I've talked on my channel. I'll link the video in the description box below about why I never got into drugs. But for me, I wanted to just compete the best against the best. And this year, at this given year, WPC Worlds was in the United States, so it made sense to be able to do that. It was a little bit of a rough weight cut, but things went well. My handler, Trey, did an awesome job giving me all my knee wraps that I had. For that meet, I actually used a different knee wrap. I went with metal all blacks, and I also ditched the weightlifting shoes and was back in flats. And that rep was definitely harder than the first time that I broke it. And some of that may have been a little bit of judging standards. I don't want to say that I was necessarily worried about squatting to depth. I've never had that issue in my competitive days. I never squatted a squat high. I don't know if I ever got a red light in a squat, to be honest with you. But judging was very, very stringent, much more so than the XPC. And I vividly remember first attempts of my flight, I was closing out the flight, and out of the 15-ish lifters that were in my flight, I believe I only saw 3 squats passed on depth. So I knew that judging was going to be tight. I obviously opened a little bit lighter than I probably normally would have been honest. I think I opened at like 480, 485. And given what my squat was, I barely could have evenly opened in the 500s. But the goal was to get in the meet, obviously. Second attempt was like in the 520s. And my final squat was like in the 540s. And in hindsight, I should have just went for the record on that one. But looking back, I don't think from a 4th attempt perspective that I had anything. My other goal for that meet was to try to crack 1400. Had I taken that world record attempt on a 3rd, I would have broken the 1,400 pound barrier. I would have only been the 3rd person to ever do that weighs underneath 132 pounds. So I just missed that in terms of total. If you technically add up on my lifts, they do add up to that, but not from a record standpoint, and that's all that really matters. But the goals that I wanted to accomplish at that meet happened. I broke my world record, which again wasn't necessarily the goal I had going in. The goal was a PR total and become a world champion, and I did both of those. I got what I needed to on the bench press. I didn't hit a PR, but I matched a PR on top of adding to my 545-ish squat, whatever that was in kilos. And then I did not pull the pull I needed to pull to get that 1400. I think I pulled in the low 500s at that meet on a 2nd attempt, and then just went for broke on a 3rd, just for the sheer fact that I wanted to try to get that 1400, and I missed it just on my knees. But to go on the world record side, again, I was ecstatic on that, but watching that video, there was an apparent hiccup in the middle of my squat. Like mid-range up, you could tell the bar was definitely stalled or slowed down, and I was shifting into my hips. And then after that meet, I ended up having a catastrophic event where I tweaked my low back, squatting with a cambered bar with like 4 plates and like 100-some pounds of chain. I've talked about that before as well. And that kind of gave me some back and hip issues. So, and I've kind of had those ever since, but I definitely had this hip shift problem in my normal training routine, and I never did anything about it. So I'm going to talk about that part first, and then we'll kind of talk about some pros and cons now. So what essentially happened after all that, I've not done a full power meet since that WPC Worlds because of low back and hip issues. And so looking back, my wife has even asked me, knowing with my hip and my back how it feels, was it worth it? And I unhesitantly say yes. Because think about it. How many people in the world get to say they've held an all-time world record in powerlifting? Obviously, through the years, there's been a lot because records continue to get broken. But that pool continues to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle because eventually there's going to be a cap, right? I mean, outside of gene splicing and things like that, which there's no money in powerlifting, so I don't know why you would do that. I would go to weightlifting. So records will definitely continue to be broken, but they're definitely going to slow down at that pace. And, like I said, I accomplished more than I ever thought that I would, and I did that 2 or 3 times, honestly. And I made a lot of sacrifices in those times. So this is what I want to tell you that kind of goes into it from a mental and physical standpoint. So I definitely lost some friendships over this because I prioritized training to such a high degree. I don't think from 2011 to probably 2016, 2017, I don't think I ever missed a training session. And if I did miss a training session, I found a way to make it up so that I basically didn't miss it. I mean, you're talking 7, 8 years of never missing, even feeling sick, going in, doing something. The sacrifices there that I made cost me relationships. I still have several friends, obviously, but my focus shifted and I would not go do things because I thought about how my training was going to be affected the next day. And how that deterred from my goal of being a good powerlifter. I'll say good. I don't want to say that I'm great. I don't think I'm even in the top 1,000 all time in terms of, my numbers. But that is something to consider. So if you have people in your life that you genuinely care about and you don't want to see them go away, you can get really far deep into the sport to where it takes you to a bad place where all you think about is the barbell and the weights and those things there. Obviously, I have my training partners. They were great people to rely upon, and they're obviously solid relationships and great relationships. But looking back, I lost some friendships that, quite frankly, they're going to be hard to get back because I just continue to push people away because I was being selfish. And that's something that it takes to be able to do that, is you have to be selfish. And that's not talked about from a mental perspective because you're probably disappointing people to some degree and you're doing it for a sport that's not monetarily worth anything. You could argue that with maybe some sponsorships and doing remote coaching and creating products that generates revenue further on, and that's definitely helped me in my business today. But the actual monetary money that I got from competing was only in the thousands of dollars. There's no way that it was profitable. But I clearly made those decisions and lost people. The other thing was, in terms of relationships, I had a girlfriend at the time of about 4 years. And I mean, I was not chasing like quality jobs. I was doing enough to skim by, training out of my garage, training clients on the side, working part-time jobs, literally picking stuff. And I would pick stuff based upon my training schedule and how is this going to affect my training. And in hindsight, it obviously worked for those goals, but where could I potentially be career-wise, business-wise, had I not done that? If I'd focused on that, how many more thousands of dollars would I have invested? There's a lot of monetary things there that could have happened. But like I said, I pissed away a relationship that was very good merely because of that. I love my wife dearly. Everything worked out great. I wouldn't change anything there. But again, if you have somebody that you love or a loved ones, very close family, parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, you may ruin those relationships chasing things like this. And it's never guaranteed, right? It's not guaranteed that the training and the time you're investing is going to pay off. And what are you trading that for? Are you trading it for the accolades and the recognition? Are you trading it to be able to maybe prop up a future business and strength and conditioning, powerlifting, strength sports? That's a big question mark, and there's no guarantee there, and I don't think many people think about that. So from a competitive perspective, like if you know you're not in chasing these world records and things, then this may not really pertain to you, but you can still go down this wormhole of chasing your own PRs and the amount of time that you're investing. And you have to ask yourself, what am I getting on the return side of that investment? And if that's something that makes you happy and you know you're going to be happy with it, you know, you don't have loved ones, you don't have quality relationships that you care about, and training is your outlet from your daily job, then maybe this is something worth doing. But I still think you're going to find some losses somewhere in the relationship side, maybe even the employment side, the career side, and that's not talked about. And people are going to tell you that you can balance it, you can make it work. They go hand in hand, and those people are delusional. That's the bare bones answer. They're delusional. Balance exists, but for the highest performing athletes, world records, chasing greatness, balance does not exist in terms of that. There's only one thing that matters, and that's the ultimate performance goal, or what you're chasing and striving for. That's always up here. It's always going to be priority number one, even if you talk about your family, your friends, your faith, your other accolades or other things that you do outside of the gym. Those are always going to fall second fiddle to this top thing. And if you cannot accept those terms, then chasing a world record like this, or massive records or big time meets, this may not be for you, because there is going to be a loss. It's just a question of what, when, and how. And if you it's kind of like gambling. You might get out at the right time and avoid it, but if you're someone like me and your mentality is, I can always put 5 more pounds on the bar, you're going to chase this for a long time, and you're going to continue to dump and invest into it, and you're probably never going to get that investment back to the degree that you put in, not only financially, but in terms of the emotional energy that you do. I'm obviously happy and proud of the things that I've gone on to accomplish, but I don't use them to identify who I am as a person. It's not something that I boast about. I don't introduce myself with it. I don't post it on my social media. It's obviously in some of my material whenever I go to speak or talk to people, because it does provide some credibility, right? I mean, if I went on to break an all-time world record, I probably figured some things out along the way from a first-hand perspective. But again, you have to remember that some of this is also just genetics. I don't think I have great genetics, but I obviously have the lower body and the build to be able to squat a house. So through the hard work and determination, that worked out. But the investment to me is, looking back, it was worth it for the record in the moment, but looking back, I would certainly change some things. All right, so let's talk about some of the pros. That might have got a little deep for you there, but the pros of breaking that record obviously were a lot of recognition, setting goals and accomplishing them. It's went on to give me validity in terms of the way that I trained, the effort and the science that I put into my training, the clients that I've worked with that have gone on to have successful careers because of my mistakes, because of what I've learned and my successes. It's made me challenge and think about the way that I approach training now with all the athletes that I work with, both sport and strength sport. It's really made me dive into science a little bit more in terms of the conjugate system, because especially whenever I was doing it, conjugate for raw lifting was just like, I don't want to say it was non-existent, but I mean, there weren't too many people that were using it in a raw perspective the way that I was. The only other person that I can think of at the time was Matt Winning, and he obviously was past his highest competitive days. He still went on to break a world record squat, I do believe, as well, maybe even 2. And Matt Winning was somebody actually that helped me with my bench press. So, I drew from things like that. So it put me in connections with people. When you are in an elite club of an all-time world record holder, you obviously interact with more people like that. You bounce ideas off people like that. I trained with a lot of stupid, freaking strong people. Dave Tate and Elite FTS supported me from day one before I even got to that. But after that fact, they tried to use my knowledge and my experiences to educate others. And so that obviously, flourished to help my business, not only my training business at the time, but now my training facility. And they still continue to do good things with me within that company. And when people reach out to me locally, it's not necessarily leading that I'm like a world record holder, but they know that I know how to train and get results from that training. I'm not going to just make things up off the top of my head. So clearly there has been a benefit to doing this. And I'm definitely proud of that. I can't say that the world record is solely responsible for that. I like to think that my personality and my education and my experiences do that, but I do think when you got the proof in the pudding, people are more likely to buy in and listen versus if I just squatted 400 pounds at 132, that's still impressive, right? But it's not 567. It's not an all-time world record. It's not being the best of the best, especially for a year straight. So that has gone on to positively influence my life, and I continue to reminisce. I will always think about those things. They're definitely stories that I'm going to be able to share with my future son that's coming. So it's a very unique story that not a lot of people get to experience, and being able to share those with people and then use that education and knowledge to help others, to me, that's what I personally find the most enjoyable about the success that I had on the platform with those world records. So let's talk about now some injury things and what I would do differently. All right, so some things that I would do differently looking in hindsight, because hindsight's always 20/20. The biggest thing that I would do differently in the training side would be I would focus more so on maintaining my mobility, my soft tissue work, having quality warm-ups, less volume in the barbell lifts. I definitely push the volume quite a bit. I think I would reduce that a little bit in hindsight. I would have had much longer off seasons. I pushed my off seasons probably much harder than I needed to. And by that I mean not necessarily that like I was training too hard. I just was not good at picking and choosing my battles. I would think that every day had to be a 10 out of 10. And I didn't have enough sessions that should have been, 4s and 5s and just, I don't want to say go through the motions, but understand that the day's not going to be the best day. So let's just do the bare minimum, get in and get out. I definitely did not do that well. I also wish that I would have maintained my weight a little bit better. I definitely dieted well, and very rarely would I get over 12 pounds over the weight class. But in hindsight, I think I would have, by hypertrophy training in the off season, I think I would have, wish I would have done a little more DC or dog crap training in terms of just pushing one hard set on particular exercises, especially accessory work, machine-based work, especially when I was doing the reduction of the barbell work immediately after a meet. I also wish that from a conjugate side that I would have dove in even more on the specificity side, closer towards the meet, and outside of the meet only done things with a safety bar, a cambered bar, a Swiss bar. I already used those and had variety, but I was still doing, reverse band work and floor press with a straight bar and still back squatting with a straight bar. Those are things that I think I could have addressed a little bit in terms of the long term looking at this. If I would have said, hey, I want to compete until I'm 35 in my days today, my age today, those are the things that I would have changed for sure. I also would have done a lot more quote-unquote athlete training in the off-season. I wish I would have implemented more plyometrics. I wish I would have done more sprinting. I wish I would have done more athletic-based movement, more lateral lunges, more med ball work, more breathing drills, which that wasn't as popular then, but had I stayed healthy enough to get to those things becoming more into fruition, I would have understand the respiration mechanics a little bit more and use that to help my hip and low back mobility, maybe my shoulder mobility. I never had shoulder issues, thank goodness, during my competitive days, but playing preventative maintenance. Those are all things from a training side that I for sure would have done differently. I would have taken more true weeks off, and by that I mean not just the week after a meet, but maybe after a 6 or 8 week training cycle in the off season, taking another week where I would just almost completely step away from training. Still do some general GPP of walking and things of that nature, but a little less on the resistance side to desensitize my body so that I could resynthesize the training volume that I'm going to implement, and then that would keep my joints and my body feeling a little more fresh. The things that I did do well, though, I walked all the time. I definitely did my upper back prehab. I used the reverse hyper a lot. So, I did some of those things really well, but that's how I would have changed the things in training. I wish I would have focused a little bit more on salt and my hydration during the off season. I definitely focused on it during the in-season meet prep side of things, but not so much in the off season. Element and some of those things didn't really exist, but it doesn't mean I wouldn't be able to get sodium, but I certainly could have. That's probably where those things go. I felt like my sleep and everything did pretty well. So that's probably going to cover a majority of that. And then I also wish that I would have just enjoyed life a little bit more in the off season. I wish I wouldn't have been so stringent on my training schedule in the off season. I would have been a little more flexible, doing things a little more socially, to allow for mental decompression. In hindsight, I probably should have had somebody that I could talk to, whether that be a counselor or, a direct mentor that really was just there for me for lifting. Whether I'm hiring somebody or if I find a friend that I consult that also competes, to voice my concerns. Those are all things that maybe not physically affect me in terms of how my lifting went, but I definitely do think that would have changed my mentality on training and how I approach things and how I was such a stickler to be on it all the time, and I would have been able to relax a little bit more, and that could have maybe bought me some more years there. And then finally, in terms of that realm as well, the mental health side of things, I wish I would have just found a different way to compete more often. And that would have been in bodybuilding, you could say strongman. I'm probably not big enough to do strongman, but grip training, or even just, going outside and playing a game of pickup basketball or something like that, getting back in the wrestling room. I have a wrestling background. That's other stuff that I wish I would have explored a little bit more in the quote-unquote off-season. I can still train, but my training would be still much more generalized, and I'm doing other athletic things that I'm not worried about pushing my squat 500 pounds week in and week out. I'm in the mid to low fours, and then I want to take 6 to 8 months to ramp up for a meet. My body, I think, would be in a much better place. In terms of my hip stuff now, the hip is definitely bothersome right now, and there's definitely some days where it's very aggravating. It's almost depressing to an extent sometimes when I struggle to bend over to tie my shoe, or I go to bend over to grab an object, or I was on vacation, I was doing a hip mobility drill, and I literally threw my back out doing a hip mobility drill. I can't say for 100% certainty that powerlifting is to blame for that, but you'd have to think that those kind of loads that I've put on my structure of my body had some kind of role to play in that. And it does affect my daily life. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't get to train the way that I want to train my lower body. I do breathing and mobility work every single day now, just so that I can get around what most people would say decent. And it's still not good enough for the average person, honestly. So, those are the things that I don't think people think enough about of what could be. Maybe I'm an outlier, but I think if you try to find enough people that have done this at a very high level for a very long time, wear and tear is a legitimate concern. And it's more so a legitimate concern because of the way that you structure your training, the way you handle your nutrition, your sleep and recovery. All those things start to add up as you age. So if you're listening to this and you're younger than I am, 30 or less, 32 or less, and you're not doing mobility work, you're not working on respiration mechanics, you're not focusing on nutrition, you're not focusing on sleep, you're not getting your blood work done, these are all things that sound stupid in your 20s. And in my mid 30s, which is still considered young in my opinion, you can call me old if you want to, but those are things that, looking back, no question I wish I would have been doing. Like, those are the areas that will buy you the time to train the way you are now to the age that I am now in my mid 30s, and then obviously in your 40s and your 50s. So hopefully those give you some ideas of kind of where I'm at mentally, but also so that you can take something away to help your training if you happen to be younger than me and you're looking to push this powerlifting or strength sport career past just a hobby. These are legitimate concerns you need to think about moving forward. All right, this was a pretty long video, pretty deep, not gonna lie to you there. If you made it this far, first of all, I wanna say thank you for just watching and listening. This is not an easy thing for me to talk about because I'm a competitor and I'm a very driven person. I like to think that I work really hard. I work really long hours. I give everything I have to other people. And the people that see that probably know that, but then, there's times where I don't give that attention and love to like my wife or my family or myself or my animals, and that mentality has obviously served me well, right? I've gone on to do athletic things at a high level, at world-class level, and I've started a business from scratch in my garage with literally no money to be able to provide myself a home and, a family and, some toys that I like to have, hobbies that I like to do. But the ability to just like express what I've been through in those years is just, it's really hard to explain without like trying to have like a true like mental breakdown with it, because to me, lifting weights is more than lifting weights. Like it's a mental outlet, it's a physical outlet, it's a way for me to compete because I'm so driven. I'm objective based, I'm goal oriented. I want to see certain things happen, and if I want something to happen, I'm gonna make it happen. And that can be done for anything. But when you take it into something like the sport of powerlifting, maybe you're doing bodybuilding or strongman if you're watching this, but if you take it into those so far, you are going to have repercussions. And I can't tell you what's valuable to you, like you can't tell me what's valuable to me. And I'm at the point now in my life where training is still important. It's always important, not only for my physical health, but my mental health, my outlets, it's almost my identity, but I don't attach to it that way. I'm not posting my training on social media. I don't care about that anymore. I train for me, and you have to ask what you're trying to get out of your training. And if you want to be a world-class athlete, you want to hit these massive freaking weights, you will have to make sacrifices, and only you can tell yourself whether you think it'll be worth it or not. And you may not know till after the fact, and that's a risk that you're having to take. And I took that risk. I look back, and in the moment, the records were 100% worth it. Even the way my hip feels, my back feels, I still don't regret those things because I met some of the most amazing people in my life and the most amazing moments. I got to travel and do stuff like that. I learned so much. It's benefited my business, my family. So to me, it's worth it. But if you're just a competitor and you don't do strength and conditioning, you're not going to school, you're not getting, your master's, like, Louis Simmons isn't alive anymore. To me, that was a highlight of my career, was to train with Louis Simmons. Like, I speed squatted with Louis Simmons. That's stuff that I will never take for granted and never, trade away. And I trained with John Meadows, and I competed with Matt Winning and Steve Goggins, and there's Matt Winning. There's just so many amazing, Chuck Vogelpohl. I've competed with some of these people that are considered the greatest of all time, and so those are moments that I don't regret. But who those people are to you now might be different, so maybe that gets you something in the sport out of it. But you have to just ask yourself, is this going to potentially be worth it? And that's really all I can say there. So yeah, if you made it this far in the video, I want to say thank you for watching. You listened to me ramble long enough. I hope you just took away one thing, whether that be you decide to push this and go for world records and massive numbers, where you're just like, what, this is a hobby for me. I don't want to go down that path that Brandon went down. I don't want my body to feel like that. I don't want to lose relationships. I don't want to have financial issues with it. I don't want to go mentally unstable or have mental health issues. Addiction patterns, substance abuse issues. Those are all real things. And, I scathed away without really any of those issues. I still think mentally, the way that I'm driven, I do see repercussions sometimes in my day-to-day life, but not like major to where I'm like making bad life decisions. But, I took the physical toll. And you're gonna be lucky if you walk away unscathed. Let's just put it that way. You're either gonna get out, like I said, like gambling, you're gonna get out in time and be thankful, or if you stick around and push it and push your luck, it will catch up to you at some point. All right, I think I've rambled enough here, but if this was something that you enjoyed listening to, do me a favor, smash the like button, leave a comment, let me know if you like this kind of video. If there's something that you took away, I really would like to hear about it. I try to interact with everybody on my channel. And if you're looking for training advice, things of that nature, I'm always willing to answer that. That's not like something I'm going to charge you for a consultation for anything. I'm just going to be a good, genuine person and just answer those questions for you and help you out. That's kind of the role of being in the sport, in my opinion, is that you give back. So again, a little deeper video. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, thanks again. I'll see you at the next video.